What does it mean to live a resilient life? I'm Ryan Mannion. I lost my brother to war and my mom to cancer, and I've learned a lot about myself along the way. Now, as the CEO of Travis Mannion Foundation, I'm on a journey to explore what it means to be resilient against life's many challenges. Join me and some incredible guests as we ask ourselves the hard questions and define what it means to struggle well. All right, we are back, and I am bringing on a long-lost relative to the show, Kate Mannion from Barstool. It's great to have you here, and I feel very kindred to you. You know, you're a Mannion from Philly. It's like, it's kind of crazy.
I know, another Mannion. Can I say how the Travis Mannion Foundation first came on my radar?
Yes, please.
So I was in Afghanistan in 2012. I was there in 2010, but then again in 2012. And I was walking through, I worked physical security at that point. And I'm in my office and people were coming and going all the time, getting different security badges and yada, yada. And this Marine, I wish I had gotten his name, but he stops dead in his tracks, looks at my name tapes and goes, "No way. Did you know Travis? Like, are you related to Travis Mannion?" And I was like, I had never heard his name before or anything. Yeah. So I was like, "Oh man, I'm so sorry. I'm not." And he looked so bummed. I was like, I could be related to him. I don't know. Let me do a 23andMe. I don't know. But then he told me really quickly who your brother was. And I got goosebumps up and down. And he said too, that because I'm from the Philly area too. And he's like, he's from the Philly area. And it just really hit home to me. And so I looked up his story and everything, and I was so moved by it. And then going back to the Philly area to visit family and stuff all the time, I'd go to like a sports game or whatever, and I'd see the Travis Mannion tent, and I'd see that, and I'd always have to go up and be like, "Just so you know, I'm a Mannion too, and I'm in the Marines, and I know Travis's story." And so I've just always felt this love for the Travis Mannion Foundation. Oh, and I do feel like a cousin. I'm like the trashy cousin of the Travis. Can I be?
It was funny because I told Connor, he texted me and he was like, "Yeah, I heard you got a long lost relative coming on this morning." I said, "I do." And I said, listen, the fact of the matter is like, I'm sure sometime over the last several years, Kate and I have stood behind the same bar in Sea Isle smoking cigs and we didn't even know each other, I mean, that's just, he's like, "Oh, no doubt." So, and it was funny because I came on Zero Block 30. I can't even remember what it was, but I came on with Tim Sullivan. It was very early on. I think you guys were like just starting out.
Pretty brand new.
Yeah, and Tim was a firefighter from Rescue One in New York that my brother connected with before he left for his second deployment. And we were on around September 11th, and I had not heard of Zero Block 30. It was just like, "Oh, we have this podcast you guys are going on." And I really didn't even know much about Barstool at that time. And I was like, "Okay." And I remember you're like, "I'm Kate Mannion." And I was like, "Wait, what?" And so again, it was, and I was reading up. So I didn't realize, your dad is one of 13.
Yes. Yep.
My dad is one of 10. So, where did your dad grow up? Was he in the city?
He's a Delco guy.
Delco, okay.
And so Drexel Hill, Havertown, that kind of area. The middle child of the 13.
So my dad was the fifth. He was 5. It was 5 boys, 5 girls, and he was number 5. Like he was.
This is like a bizarro world.
Yeah. There's a lot of parallels.
We should do the Spider-Man pointing at each other meme. It's like, us, yeah. Crazy.
And so my dad grew up in Lower Merion, so he was right around the same area. And and I was laughing too because I had Dave Portnoy on a few weeks ago, and I had this clip, and it was right when the Phillies were doing, like, we were at our peak. It's like, we're going all the way, and I'm giving him like so many props for like putting it all on the Phillies. And I was like, I'm a Philly girl. I love the Phillies. And we put that clip out, and it was the comments. I mean, the clip went viral, not because it was about the Phillies or anything, but it was because "Oh, you're not from Philly," and the comments went crazy, and everyone was trying to determine especially on TikTok, like, where was I from? And it was like, oh, she sounds South Jersey. No, I think she's Delco. And one person said, that sounds like a Bucks County accent to me. And I so wanted to be like, you got it. But I just wanted the comments to go wild. And then I started messing with them. So then they were like, oh, what part of Philly? And so I put, I'm from Port Richmond. I wanted to find something like real obscure, you know. And then, then all the Port Richmond people came out and they were like, yeah, we love you.
We haven't seen you down at the parish.
No,
you
they
never
were
been
actually
down to St. Dots.
No, they were actually like really excited. They were like, yeah, Port Richmond. But it was so funny because, you know, like, I have to imagine that people comment on your accent a lot. I get it
all the time because I'm actually from Chester. Like, so my dad, once my parents started having kids, they moved out to Chester County. All my family is still Delco, but like I'll do the accent, but people are always like, you're not really from, I'm like, I know, yeah. But I've been marinating in it my whole life. You can hardly understand my Aunt Helen when she's talking. God bless. But all the communion parties have crucifix-shaped soft pretzels still, you know. I'm still living in the realm.
Oh,
but
my
yeah,
gosh.
no, it's very funny. It gets people going.
Oh, and it's so funny because when I go anywhere, I don't pick up, I mean, I don't have a Delco accent, but I definitely have something enough that when I leave the state of Pennsylvania, people right away are like, oh, you're from Philadelphia. And I'm like,
well, I was listening to episodes and I love, even in the beginning when you do the intro, I'm the CEO. And I'm like, there she is. Yes, the CEO of Ryan. Yeah, I'm like, I know. All right, I love it. I love it.
All right, before we kind of dive into things, I have a couple Philly questions for you. Because I always ask people from Philly what favorite cheesesteak.
Mine would actually have to be, it's on South Street and it burned down. Not Pat's, it's Jim's on Jim's. My brain is always like Pat's and Gino's, but it's Jim's on South Street. Have you ever been?
Yeah, Jim's was great.
It's my favorite. Did you see that they just finally reopened after they had a huge fire? Whole thing fell apart and now they have like a new beautiful space, but they still have the glass where they chop the meat and it's like hitting the glass right in front of you, so you're getting really excited for it.
I love it.
That's my big time favorite.
I have not been to Jim since it reopened, but Sean and Tom here are nodding enthusiastically about the support of Jim. Yeah. So they like Jim's.
I'm an extra whiz too. I'm a dirtbag. It's the grossest.
Oh, I'm extra whiz, sauteed onions, like give it all to me. It needs to be slopping out and just disgusting.
The sloppier the better. Yes. It's sad. Yeah.
So the other thing that, again, connections all coming together, you know, you're a Jersey Shore gal. I'm Avalon. Mm-hmm. So my husband was actually born and raised in Avalon.
Oh, cool.
And I met him at the Jersey Shore at Sylvester's Fish Market. We worked there in high school, and he was the big mahoof. He was like the counter guy, and everybody was like, oh, that's Dave Borek, you know? Yeah. And so I was a waitress there, but, you know, of course, in high school, especially, and in college, you know, we went to Sea Isle to the bars because you couldn't get into the bars in Avalon if you were not 21. So what's your favorite Sea Isle bar?
This is a deep cut. Have you ever been to McNutley's?
Of course.
It's not up by the main strip of bars. It's right next to the Acme in the middle of the island. And it is, and speaking of not having to be 21, that might be why it's been my favorite since I was 17. But that's my whole family every year. Like the last full week in June, we rent like 3 blocks of houses. Yeah. Everybody goes down. There's like 200 of us. We have like the Long Line Beach Chair, and that's like the neighborhood where we reside. And so it's like they have, I think it's, their brag is that it's like a bar campus and there's 8 bars within the campus. There's a tiny bar in the liquor store that only has 2 stools. There's like 3 different outdoor bars there. So you can drink there all day and have a different experience every hour. It's a delight.
Right next to the Acme. Right next to the Acme.
Yes. Right next to it. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, every year I see you on, you know, your social media that like you're down at your Jersey Shore week. And I'm like, oh, she's hitting it all. I love it. Yeah.
I'm guessing you've had some good nights at the OD.
I mean, who hasn't had good nights at the OD? Come on.
I know. Rest in peace to the Carousel.
Yeah, but, there was, you know, Sea Isle was the place in college. It was like, I was in Avalon, but we always went over the bridge. And now I've got, you know, my 15-year-old daughter who this summer, all of a sudden, the world of Sea Isle opened up for her. So she was like, Mom,
keep her away from McNutley's.
Yeah, Mom, I'm gonna go to my friend's house in CI. I'm gonna ride my bike over the bridge. And I'm like, no, you're not riding your bike over the bridge. And my husband would be like, I'll drive you over. I'll put the bike in the back of the pickup truck. And she's like, that's so embarrassing. And and then you'd do because what happened in Avalon, Avalon's a little snooty, and they really crack down on kids having any sort of fun. And so, you can't be anywhere. So the kids figured, if we go to Sea Isle, we can amass hundreds of kids on the beach. So I'd go on the Life 360. She'd be like, I'm at Molly's house. And I'm like, no, you're on the beach, and get off the beach. It's 11 o'clock at night, but it's a whole new world, like going through that. And, you're in the new stages of parenting. Every stage, you think it gets easier. It's just different. It's not easier. Just different.
I had dinner with two of my cousins who have teenagers now, and I was telling them, like, because having a toddler, I'm like, oh man, blah, blah, blah. And then I started listening to them, and I was like, oh, I should just enjoy this toddler stage where I'm in control of every facet of their life. Like, that's actually pretty cool, and I'm going to enjoy that for now because, the teen years seem like a whole new world.
Teen years are a lot. I have been, like, totally following your motherhood journey, and I saw you posted the other day your story with osteoporosis, and I mean, it's the craziest thing ever, and I've never heard of it until you started talking about it and putting out what you've been through. And I'd love to for you to share a little bit about that story and what happened.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I'm the coolest Marine with osteoporosis out there. Hell yeah. Early onset, the total badass, you guys. Not a pogue at all. So actually, after I had my first son, about 4 months, am I the first person to talk about breastfeeding on the Resilient Life podcast?
100%.
Okay. So about 4 months after I had my first son, breastfeeding never really worked super great for us. And so it was a mix of formula and breastfeeding. So it was not full on. And I wasn't really pumping anything. But about 4 months after I had him, I started to have severe back pain where I was having trouble getting him in and out of the crib. And one day I'm walking the baby with my parents and I sneeze and it took me down to the ground. I was sobbing. They had to walk me back to the car. And for about a month, I really struggled. And I tried to get an MRI then. And it was the same thing. You have to do all this PT, blah, blah, blah. And all my friends were like, oh, I had back pain after my kid too. It'll go away. So I just waited it out and it did go away. I was like, I guess I thought I was weak or something. I was like, I guess I'm not as tough as I thought I was or whatever.
Yeah.
I had the second baby, 10-pounder, big tuna. Okay. Breastfeeding works out great. This guy is has a beer bong on my nipple. He's chugging out of but works out great. And pumping worked out great. And so didn't need formula at all. And a few months into it, again, I started to get that same back pain, but it was so much worse than with my first. It got to the point where I could hold him in a chair, but someone would have to bring him to me. And if I needed to stand up, they had to take the baby, and I could not hold the baby standing up anymore. Tiny movements, I would turn and I'd be like, oh my God, I feel like something just broke in my spine. The simplest little things. And it got to the point where I couldn't pull my own pajama pants up. I couldn't wipe my own ass. I could hardly breathe when I stood up because it felt like my upper half couldn't be supported anymore. I couldn't drive in the car because I couldn't turn my body at all. I was becoming, so I'm telling my OBGYN this at the civilian hospital, and they're like, oh, new mom back pain. Here's some stretches to do. I'm like, I can't function. This is really serious. Kind of brushed me off. I go to an orthopedist and she's like, I looked into it. There's nothing this could possibly be. It's new mom back pain. And I started to think, tell me if I'm rambling. I was like, am I having postpartum psychosis? Am I just trying to not take care of my baby? I ordered a book about how back pain is all in your head. And I was reading it and I'm like, it's all in my head. It's all in my head. But I couldn't stand up holding my own kids or I couldn't do anything. It got so bad. Family and friends had to come care for the kids for me. I was trapped in the house because I couldn't, it just escalated so badly. They made me do 6 weeks. They're like, fine, we'll give you an MRI. You got to do 6 weeks of PT too to get there.
Before every you could get the MRI, you had to do PT.
Before I could get the MRI, I would be in PT feeling like I was breaking and I would be sobbing. And so the PT people were like, we don't know what's going on. they would just have me like sit with a heating pad for the whole hour. They're like, cause they knew something was definitely wrong too.
Yeah.
And then the whole ride back from PT, they would have to like help carry me out to my car. And then the drive home, it was just like, I'm rambling, but it was a nightmare. Finally, I had this really long standing VA appointment. I had made it like months before, but it was just so hard to get an appointment sometimes with you. The second I sat down with her, she believed me right away, was like, go downstairs. You're getting an MRI right now. 2 days later, she called. She's like, you have 8 fractures in your spine,
Holy
like
shit.
2 bulging discs, a hematoma. You have like blood all over your spine. Like her first question was, she's like, are you safe at home? She thought I was like getting beaten because she's like, this is like a car crash spine. Like this is so bad. That was the longest ramble ever. But it turns out, tell me if I'm rambling.
No, you're not. I'm in shock, honestly. It's crazy.
It was, and so at the same time, I've been posting all this on my social media because I just share my life anyway. Yeah. So it's like me on the floor crying. I'm like, I don't know what's wrong with my back. Stoolie had a friend whose wife had gone through something similar, and she ended up getting diagnosed. It's called pregnancy and lactation osteoporosis, where there's some kind of malfunction in our body. And instead of like our milk coming from our whole body nutrients, it comes directly from your bones. So essentially the baby was drinking my bones.
Oh my
Every
God.
time I breastfed and pumped, I was making it worse and worse and worse. So over these 6 weeks where I'm doing PT, I'm still breastfeeding, I'm still pumping.
Right.
It turns out I was turning my bones to dust and didn't know it. And it was a whole thing. But because of that article, I knew to show the doctors at the VA, and they came up with a plan for me right away to like start taking care of it. So long story.
How do you start taking care of like, how do you repair this?
It was, well, too, like, it was so mentally terrible because I love being a mom. Like, yeah, there's hard parts and I complain about this and that, but like to not be able to like parent my own children, especially postpartum, you want to savor those moments. And like,
yeah.
And instead I was like living a nightmare. But the first thing, they got me on this medication called Evenity. The website for it is all these cotton candied haired old ladies holding porcelain dolls. It's like the osteoporosis medication. But it's a once monthly shot that you take for a year that like regrows your bones a little bit, hopefully. And then I do PT every week. I've been doing it for like, I must have gone to like 80 sessions by now, but I do PT once or twice a week at the VA. And then I wear back braces and all this stuff, and like my diet, calcium, all that stuff.
And you literally like shrunk, right? Like you like got shorter as a result of this.
Yeah, I have to roll all my pants now. I went from 5'9" to 5'5". I lost 4 inches of height. And it's crazy because my body crumpled. My chest is like concave and my stomach distends out. I have this huge crease under my boobs. Like my whole body shape changed and I'm like permanently bent. And the crazy thing is like this medication might help a little, but basically I have the bones of an 85-year-old for the rest of my life. So wow. I used to be really into hiking and biking and like all this stuff. And now like, don't bump me. Doesn't stop me from getting down at the bars and grooving, you know, but yeah, no, it's a whole thing, but it's been a long road, but I'm finally on the upswing from it. But
I just think of like all the different emotions that you go through as a new mother, right? Like when, and to be questioning, like, is this pain I'm feeling in my head? Like that had to be almost probably harder than the physical pain. Just like that.
Yeah, anguish. I thought I was having a mental breakdown. And like, this sounds like not crapping on my loved ones, but because the doctors were telling me everything was fine and there was no answers, they were like, are you okay? Like, people were having trouble believing me.
I feel like I would be the same way. I feel like if that was somebody, I'd be like, well, you know, the doctors are saying nothing's wrong. You know, I hate to think, I think I'd be like that. But this is also, I mean, I feel like the VA needs to capture your story and put it out as the good news story of the VA works. Look, you know, I mean,
I know.
Like that story itself, all you hear is the VA didn't listen. I had to go outside for out of network care. And like the VA was the one who actually listened to you, which is pretty awesome.
And like with zero, because they have the separate women's clinic and it's like all women doctors in there. The second I told her, she was like, I believe you, you're in. they were getting me, they do additional stuff, acupuncture, massage, like they went over the top. Like every single staff member I have dealt with there, and I'm there like multiple times a week for the shots or for this or for that. Like the Chicago VA has been incredible. You're right. I'm happy to be their poster child if they need, but yeah, it's a good vibe there too. Everybody's throwing a cool outfit on. Like all the veterans are dressed to the nines, and the staff seems to really like each other. So yeah, pretty good.
I love that. I don't think I've ever heard a good VA story on this podcast. I've heard a lot of bad
I know I've been to some bad ones, but this one, they're like, do you need mental health help with this too? And got that for me quick because I was struggling. Like,
yeah,
I was depressed as fuck.
Yeah.
But yeah, so no, they've been incredible.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Now, like aside from like the physical complications and like, you know, recovering from like the mental or the medical complications and the medical trauma, like just thinking about that idea of like people not listening to you. And you hear these stories all the time. And like, I think for me, it's scary because you put so much trust in like professionals, right? And I think right now, like you're kind of watching this resurgence online, especially of like, you have to advocate for yourself. And I've gotten real deep into like the campaign on our food and like what we're feeding our kids. And the fact that we are literally just poisoning our kids and, you know, the obesity, the diabetes, the all the different things that didn't exist for adolescents 50 years ago. And I say to my husband, because I found this thing where somebody put a box of Cheerios up from like 1985 and a box of Cheerios up from 2024, and they're completely different ingredients. And so my husband and I constantly get in this fight because he grew up eating Cheerios. And he's like, I'm like, don't bring Cheerios into this house. And he's like, you're nuts. They're Cheerios. Like, it's heart health. And I'm like, you're brainwashed. And we literally, and you see all this stuff, but like, it is the advocating for yourself on all these things. Like, you have to be your own best advocate, and you have to make decisions and like demand different responses and answers to things.
Well, I think too, like wonderful parents, like great, but I was raised to like, don't be a burden on people. Don't be annoying. Like, stay in your space. And so I still think a lot of women feel bad advocating for themselves because you feel like you're being too much. And so even though I knew the doctor was wrong, I knew there was something more, but I started every message with her. I'm so sorry to bug you again. I'm still really struggling here. Like, I felt like I was bugging at the civilian hospital, like everybody who had to deal with me, and that I probably was wasting their time because I was crazy, because they were saying it couldn't possibly be anything. And so that's something that's hard to get over too. And it's like, you're a Marine, come on, tough it up, blah, blah, blah. But it's like so deeply ingrained in so many of us that you don't want to be a burden. You don't want to bother anybody.
Yeah.
But I think that's a veteran thing too, is that you don't want to be a burden. And that's why so many veterans don't seek help, because you can tough it through. You can be okay without blah, blah, blah. But
well, yeah. And, it's interesting. I just had the Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps on 2 weeks ago, and he talked about like, and I told this story. So he invited me to be the guest of honor for the Sunset Parade down at Iwo Jima. And I was like, this is awesome. And I went down, and I'd met him a few times. I don't know if you've seen or heard him talk, Sergeant Major Ruiz, but he is like super mild-mannered. He's just like, he's got a very low voice. He's very quiet. And the whole time I'm thinking, every sergeant major I've ever met, they just look like a grumpy bulldog, and you're like, I get why you're the sergeant major. And he's just like super polished, but he's just talks real quiet, super nice guy. And we went down and I'm talking to him. We're at the pre-reception, and we're getting ready to go, and we get on the shuttle we're at the Women's Museum at Arlington, and we're shuttling over to Iwo Jima. And he's like, do you mind if we stop by and just give a few words of encouragement to the guys before they go out? And I'm like, no, I'd love to. So we stop behind Iwo Jima, and it's all the 8th and I Marines, and they're all there standing with their rifles, and he gets out and he's like, Marines, I brought Ryan. She's our guest of honor tonight, and I'd like for her to say a few words. And I was like, I just want to thank you all for your support of the Travis Mannion Foundation and for honoring us and for all you do for our service, your service to this country. And they were like, oh, thank you, ma'am. And then he turns around to leave, and he turns back around and he goes, if you fuck up, I will stab you where you lie in front of your parents and your families. And they were like, oorah, oorah. And I was like, oh my God, that's why there he is. And we got back on the bus, and he was like, thank you so much for doing that. And I was dying. I was just like, okay. I don't know how we started how I got onto that story, but but just talking about Marines and being in the military, when he was on, he actually said, he's like, when I was growing up, he joined the Marine Corps. He was 17 years old. He was coming over. He was from Mexico, coming over. He lived on a border town. He would come over to school every day and go back to Mexico. Come over, go to school in Arizona, and go back to Mexico. And he joined the Marine Corps, didn't even speak English when he came over here. Such a cool story. But he was like, we didn't talk about our problems, and times have changed, and I don't want to be that sergeant major. And I thought it was such a beautiful clip, so much that's how I released the episode. It was like, wow, what a great way, because he wasn't just this big bulldog and rah, rah, rah.
Right.
And the comments were visceral. They were just like, oh, the Marine Corps is woke, you're soft, you're this. And I'm like, oh, and it was all from Marines too. And that's what bothered me.
Those are the same Marines that are 22 a day. No one cares about it, blah, blah, blah. And they're the same ones that want to cry about the Marine Corps getting soft because they care about mental health. Yeah. It's a huge disconnect that those guys have there. It's crazy.
It pissed me off because there's a lot that I can put up with. I grew up in a Marine Corps family. I have lived, breathed, slept Marine Corps from the time I was born. And so I can let a lot slide, but that for me, I so wanted to just go hard in those comments. And I refrained because I'm like, I'm not going to get into a war with a 60-year-old guy living in North Carolina that I was just like, it's not worth it. But it pissed me off so much because I'm like, you guys don't get it. You just don't fucking get it. It was tough.
The good thing, especially working here for long enough, you learn that it's the loud minority. Yeah. And that it's like the iceberg, the tip of the iceberg are the assholes. And then there's this huge part of people underneath who are watching and absorbing, who actually have a life and don't have the time to be like, ugh. And so you have to remember, there are people getting a lot of good out of that stuff. You just, unfortunately, they have lives and aren't commenting, but they're there.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And, and it's one of the things, the other thing I was saying to him, and I've talked about a lot, you talk about the stigma of what the military is, what it represents, and just this huge disconnect, right? And I think that there's a lot of things I hate about social media, but there's a lot of things I love. And one of the things I do love is that social media has kind of broken down this barrier of things and people we don't understand, right? And it's taken us away from I don't understand that world, and I just see it under this pretty lens of news pieces and articles in newspapers, and it's made people see the Kate Mannion that was a Marine, but also deals with osteoporosis and raising 2 kids and enjoying a cigarette every once in a while at a bar in Sea Isle, and it's
as a treat, once or twice a year.
I love it. Yeah. Listen. But I was saying my daughter is she's a plebe at the Naval Academy. And
I've been following that, and it makes me so happy every time I see a post. I'm like, go girl, go. That's awesome.
Yeah. And it was really cool because she was always super interested in Navy because she grew up just being around the academy, but she had rose-colored glasses on, right? She went to football games and tailgates, and she did all the fun stuff. And I'm like, and as it got more and more, she really started talking about it, and she was playing lacrosse, and the Navy lacrosse coach was looking at her, and I was like, crap, I don't know if she fully understands what she's getting herself into. And I need to open her eyes to this. And I went on, and there's 2 girls that have really big social media profiles. One's a Marine that went to Navy. And I reached out to her and I was like, hey, can you talk to my daughter? She graduated in like 2019 from Navy. I'm like, can you talk to my daughter? And I want you to tell her everything you hated about the Naval Academy. Don't tell her anything good. Tell her everything that sucks about the Naval Academy. And she did. And they sat on the phone for an hour and she was like, your plebe year is going to be the worst year of your life. And, you know, and she set but it was so cool to have that kind of access. That's
awesome.
Yeah, because it was like all my brother's friends were like, we'll talk to her. And I'm like, you're 45 years old. She doesn't want to talk to you. Like, she doesn't relate to you in any way, shape, or form. I need her to talk to a female, and a female that went through this recently, not back in the early 2000s, you know? So, but it's, you know, one of the things that I think is transforming just, again, from a female perspective, like what it means to serve in the military. Like, and I keep saying, like, I say to her all the time, like, you can still be both, because she's a super fun girl. She likes to have a good time. And I'm like, you can still be both, you know, remember that in every, you know, she's the kid that when I showed up for Parents Weekend, I picked her up and she wanted to go to Target. She needed to go to Target. Well, as a plebe, you have to wear your uniform, like, no matter what, unless you're on Christmas or Thanksgiving or spring break, like, no matter what. And so we pulled up into the Target parking lot and she started crying. And I'm like, why are you crying? She's like, I'm embarrassed. I don't want to get out in my uniform. And me and her sister and her best friend are in the car. And we're like, you look awesome. Like, you look amazing. And she was like, I don't want to go in. You know, she'd die if I was telling.
I walked by in Cookie Monster pajama pants. I'm like, you're fine.
Yeah, exactly. But, you know, I think for a lot of females, they're kind of dealing with, and I don't know if you felt this, but like dealing with like embracing their femininity, but also like being in the military, you know?
Well, unfortunately for me, I was always kind of a dude. I've always been kind of just a gross person. No, but I had the BCGs, those glasses that you have, the big, thick brown, the birth control glasses, they called them. But I know it felt so nice on the weekends and to like, I would lock all the guys out. I would like take an hour to straighten my hair and like really get pretty and like, and there, it's so easy because you're in a uniform all week. It's like, what's that movie from the 90s where she takes off her glasses and the guys are like, oh my God, she's so hot. 10 Things I Hate About You or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
Lady Briggs.
Yes.
It was like every weekend I got to be Lady Briggs where I like just took off my bun and people were like, God damn. It was great. I miss those days. But yes, you can totally be both. And I think that's the great thing too. You're talking about social media, like representation does matter. And it pumps me up so much when I see a badass woman in the military on social media who's doing both, who's like shows the duality of like, here's all this cool stuff I do in my personal life. And then here's me kicking ass in uniform. And like, especially because it can be isolating to be a woman in the military. If you're like, for a while, I was the only woman in my unit. And it's great to see other women kicking ass and be like, okay, cool. I see her doing it and I can do that too. Yeah.
And so your journey into the Marine Corps was like interesting. So you're in college. Where did you go to college?
Indiana University of Pennsylvania, IUP.
Know it well, IUP. That's where you went to party when you went to Widener.
I usually party, they call it, IUP.
Yeah. I mean, literally, I remember I went to Widener. And I remember many a times where I had a bunch of friends who went to IUP. It'd be like 2 a.m. on a Friday night. And we'd be like, let's drive to IUP for the rest of the weekend. And we'd get in the car and just drive up the turnpike and spend the rest of the weekend at IUP. And there was a lot of shenanigans that went on there. And interestingly enough, a lot of my friends that went to IUP followed. You were a senior and didn't graduate.
Correct.
That is actually quite a common story at Indiana University of Pennsylvania.
I know so many people from like the east side of Pennsylvania who like half the people I went with, we all dropped out like the same time. With, like,
I know so many people from my high school that went to IUP and didn't just go for 1 year, like literally went to for 4 years and didn't graduate from IUP. So,
yep, it's insane. It's great. That's, you burn out, you party so hard, and then like you right at the end, you just can't go any longer. That's,
can't make it to
that's
the
what
finish
happened
line.
to me.
And so you leave, and then how do you like, I mean, you say you had like family that served in the Marine Corps, but like, how do you make that decision to go from 4 years of partying at IUP to like, I'm going to join the Marines?
Yeah, and even so it was just one of my uncles, one of the 13, the oldest of the 13 was a pilot. He was a fighter jet pilot in the Marine Corps, but he didn't talk about it much. Like it wasn't like a big so he was really the only person I knew. But it was more so my parents said, you can drop out, but good luck finding somewhere to live. And I was like, oh man, like, people are really pissed at me right now. What's my plan B? And I always wish I had like some noble, awesome story about like, and I did want to serve. Like I did always admire the military and stuff, but it was so foreign to me. I tried to go to boot camp with a belly button ring in still. That's how little I knew about it. They had to cut it off with pliers at MEPS right before I got on but anyway, I guess it was like one of those, I saw a commercial. I was sitting at home. I knew I needed a plan B. It was Christmas break. I saw like a military commercial and I was like, well, let's go talk to the recruiters. I talked to all the recruiters and the Marine Corps. I knew I sucked. I knew I needed like the biggest kick in the ass ever because I knew that's not who I was. Like I was doing real dumb things in college. Like I was partying way too hard. And the Marines were like, the recruiter there was like, we can give you the kick in the ass you need. We can be the ones to do that gladly. And I was like, one ticket to Paris Island, please. I'll take it. And it was that easy.
Now, when
it worked.
When you got there, because I always ask like, my brother's friends, like when they got to Navy, and again, I am not making any comparison for plebe year at the Naval Academy to Paris Island, but they both have their own degrees of like suckiness, but but Paris Island certainly will take the cake. But I'm always like, did you ever want to quit? And they're like, they always say to me like every single day, you know, like every day I was like, why am I here? You know, like when you got there, were you just like, what the hell am I doing here?
Oddly enough, I was so determined. I like drank the Kool-Aid so hard that I really in my head was like, you're going to get through this and you're going to come out like a better person. I like really, really, really drank the Kool-Aid. I had so much beer weight. The keg was always outside, right? I lived in the rugby house. I was like 170. I was like a big girl by the time I played rugby. I went down to, I was like a size 7 and I went down to a size 0 by the time I left boot camp. That's how it only lasted for like 3 weeks. It was awesome. But like I put my whole heart and soul into it and I actually really kind of loved it. And I slept like a baby every night because I didn't have to think about anything. Like I really wanted to better myself. And when like graduation day, I feel like I still remember how tall I was trying to stand. It felt like the links in my spine were about to like unhinge off because I was like, look, mom and dad, I'm not the POS that I was before. And so it was hard, but it wasn't that hard for me because I was so into it.
That's awesome. And that was, what year was that?
That was 2008. The only thing that really got in my head was the sand fleas. I'm not a bugs lady, never will be. And I hated that so much. So,
and so you graduated in 2008 and then you deployed for the first time in 2010?
2010. Yes. So got to the fleet. I was military police. And
where were you stationed?
At first I was in Camp Pendleton and it was military police. I joined up for that thinking, oh, I'll be a police officer on a base somewhere. And then I'll be a police officer out in the real world somewhere, like perfect path. Now I have a plan.
Yeah.
I had never heard of field side MP, which is like you go to other countries to train it's like police mentoring teams kind of, and their armies. I got put in a field unit in Camp Pendleton. So I trained with these guys for a year to deploy to train the Afghan police. And when it came time to go, and these guys were like my brothers, like knew them like the back of my hand. Like as soon as it came time to like get the orders and go, everybody got the orders except for me. They're like, oh, sorry, you're a girl. You can't go. It's outside the wire. And I was like sobbing on the phone with my dad because I felt like they were my brothers going without me. And I kept up with the training and was better than some of them. And yet I wasn't allowed to go. Like it was crazy to me. And I had this great staff sergeant who was like, don't worry, I think I found you a loophole. there's these female engagement teams, like a Lioness program. They're calling them female engagement teams now. I think I can get you on this first one to go. And he did. He got me on that. So I ended up being outside the wire more than the guys from my unit most of the time. And I ended up getting to do that first deployment like around the same time as them. So that was awesome.
And what were you like, building relationships with the locals? Was that kind of what you did?
Yeah, it was in this area called Marja, in the south, like a real poppy heavy area. And just doing things the men couldn't because I was a woman. So making connections and trying our best to win the hearts and minds. Hearing the phrase now makes me cringe, like the old hearts and minds. But it was really cool. It was attached to 3-6 and 2-9 were the infantry units I was attached to. And that was a challenge in itself too, because they really know each other like the backs of their hands. They do all this training together, and all of a sudden they get this attachment that's like, "Hey guys, I'm Kate. I'm here to hand out sewing machines," and they're like, "You're gonna get someone killed." So that was a challenge in itself too, like trying to ingratiate myself with these guys. Luckily, I already smoked cigarettes and I could fart with the best of them. So
they're like, "You're in." But I imagine that some of them, like, it wasn't all like warm welcome. From all of them.
Not at all. And sometimes it was the leadership that was the most resistant to it. And I would like be sitting on a fob for days at a time unused. And the sergeants would be like, "Sir, like, come on, we can use her to blah, blah, blah." And it took more convincing on that end. But yeah, it ended up being like, oddly enough, a really, I don't want to say a positive experience, but one of the most eye-opening experiences of my life, and especially to see firsthand what infantry goes through. As somebody who, it's a totally different world, they're in a different section of the base on Pendleton. You never know what they're up to up there, up at their ranges. But seeing what they went through firsthand, and the heartbreaks and the trials they went through, and still getting up the next morning and going out on patrol no matter what happened the day before, gave me just a whole new respect for the infantry. So
now, when you went back in 2012, did you do the same thing?
No, I ended up getting a secondary MOS in physical security for the second time around. And so it was like, does this space have a big enough serpentine? I still look at curbs and I'm like, that curb's not high enough to stop a vehicle going over 20 miles an hour. It was all like, security stuff, gates and serpentines and scanning eyeballs to see if they match the terrorist list. And it was I only went outside the wire a few times that time, which was crazy too, going from like sleeping in the mud in Marja for weeks at a time to being like, I can't believe there's a line at Pizza Hut again. Like,
well,
very different deployments.
And I mean, if you look at the scope of that 20 plus year war in Iraq and Afghanistan, the amount of women that were outside of the wire, like, you are among a very, very, very small group of women that did that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, that's pretty
incredible. It made you like a unicorn. The Afghans would like stop dead in their tracks and be like, can I touch your bun? I'm like, yeah, give it a squeeze. Like, come on. Yeah, it's crazy, right? I'm out here. Yeah. So
oh my God, that's wild.
Definitely,
that is
an interesting experience.
So I'd love to, not to get too deep, but I would love to know, like, talk to me about the withdrawal and how you were feeling about, well, before we talk about that, so, your job is engagement. You're out there being able to, connect with the people. Like, when you left Afghanistan and, I don't want to get into all the nuances of like, were we there for the right reasons or not? But like, did you feel like you made a difference? Like, did you feel like when you came back that you made a difference?
I felt, I'm trying to remember what I felt like. I know I had written letters to my dad where I was like, just being down here on the ground and looking at the scope of things and what we say we're trying to do and what we're doing, like, it feels very futile.
Yeah.
Like, I felt like, just like, there's no way that what they're saying we're trying to do in the news is what's, like, I just couldn't see the long pay. Like, I feel like even Lance Corporals on the ground were like, what are we doing? Like, come on. But at the same time, you still went all out every day for the people to your left and your right.
Yeah.
But I did feel like we had helped people. Like, at the same time, schools got opened and we tried to hold elections, and I know there were people that we helped and that we hooked up with NGOs from all different countries to help make lives better in different ways. So I know on a small scale, there were people that were helped. And I know like all the people I served with, like our hearts were in it,
Yeah.
you know? And so I guess that's all you could really ask for. Sorry, I don't know if that was the best
No,
answer, but
it actually, you know, I remember one of the last emails that Travis sent back. He talked about like, I don't think the average American understands what these men and women are doing every day. And it was more about, like you said, like the incredible things he was seeing, like his brothers and sisters to the left of right of him doing. And like, he was just kind of in awe of like what was happening in terms of probably what you feel in that shared brotherhood and sisterhood of like what you're, you know, what you're trying to accomplish together.
That sums it up like perfectly kind of. And when I looked at the big picture, I got a little like, what's going on? But when I looked at what we were accomplishing on the ground, like food banks and getting farmers, like there was all these programs that my fellow Marines, like not even super high ranks, were running and running successfully. And like, that was impressive to me.
Yeah.
Like across the board.
So when the entire shitstorm of the withdrawal in Afghanistan happens, like, how are you feeling?
I honestly felt like I was a wreck.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't, like it fucked me up bad. And I think because I get emotional every time I talk about it, it was coming to an end at some point or whatever. And I want to use my words carefully, especially talking to someone who knows the ultimate sacrifice, and the heartbreak that I can't even imagine. But like we lost a good amount of people from both the 2 infantry units I was with and people from my own unit. And you wanted a happy ending with a bow on top. You wanted it to be something you could point to and say, you know, they're gone, but look what is left in its place.
Yeah.
This amazing, you know, and that's just not how it played out. And also too, for the Afghan people, the interpreters, the people who helped us, the people who you wanted a happy ending for them too, because there were so many good people there that deserve good lives. And now, so just to see 20 years and then the Taliban swoops in right away and that's that. And, you know, the Abbey Gate bombing, putting the crushing blow, and it was just, I just felt so overwhelmed by the whole thing. Because you want to look at the leadership of our country and you want to believe, because even at the lowest level, like I feel like Lance Corporal Kate was writing her dad going, this is not sustainable. This is not something, and you want somebody to have the balls to like
say that.
Switch things up if they know it's not. And instead, I feel like each administration just kept kicking the can down the road. You take it, you take it, you take it. This is gonna, and it was a disaster. And yeah, no, sorry, I'm rambling, but like I do struggle. I struggled. I had like a really, really hard time with it. I actually went back to therapy for a little bit.
I mean, I get it. I mean, I had a hard time with it. You know, it was this whole, and listen, Travis was never even in Afghanistan. He was in Iraq twice, you know, but I have friends that didn't make it back from Afghanistan. And I had this like weird thing happen where like Travis's interpreter from Iraq, he actually came over. My brother wrote him a letter to get his temporary visa like the week before Travis was killed. And the New Year's Eve after Travis died, like Travis died in April, that December 31st, like Mustafa was in my house, like celebrating New Year's Eve with me, you know? And so I was like, oh my gosh. And they, you know, Travis would always talk about, because he was part of a MIT team. So he was training the Iraqi army. So he felt a really tight kinship with the Iraqis that he was training. And, you know, that same thing was happening in Afghanistan. And you know, I had interpreters that were like reaching out to me, and lo and behold, I brought a couple of them over, and they freaking live in Doylestown. I mean, you know, Bashamal and Muhammad and Layla, like they're my family. And it's just, I just felt so affected by all of those things that you said. And I think to end our nation's longest war on the note of like, it's it's worse than it ever was, right? Like where you guys were is worse than it was before you were even there. And it's just like, wow, you know?
It was hard to, and like the moral injury of watching my fellow lower enlisted buddies and lower enlisted officers be the ones to scramble, trying to do the right thing for the Afghans they knew and trying to make sure their buddies were okay. It was like, damn, this all fell on
us.
You know, there's all this leadership, but the heartbreak and the moral injury and all that stuff, it rains down on us.
Yeah.
And it's just like really disillusioning in a lot of ways.
I will say it totally, but I think one of the coolest things was watching how many Afghans got out as a result of all of those people, not the administration, not, you know, the State Department who said they were doing all these things. And then you're talking to the Afghans on the ground. They're like, we haven't received any information. We have no idea. And then you just see all of these success stories of these Afghans that came over because of the 20-year-old Lance Corporal that somehow knew somebody at Abbey Gate that worked their I mean, it was just, that was pretty awesome to see.
Never underestimate the Lance Corporal Underground. We're out there making things. And give us a WhatsApp and the Lance Corporal Underground, and we're gonna,
The amount of like underground WhatsApp like chat, I can't even remember the ones that I ended up. Signal was a big one. I was like on all these Signal, and I was like, oh my gosh, brings me back. It was crazy. So I kind of want to finish up by just, you know, you put your life out there in a big way on social media. You know, your journey as a Marine, motherhood, all of these things. And you do it in like such a, I mean, you're a comedian. You're funny as hell.
I try.
I mean, you're very funny. And, but what I love about you is, like you said, you like kind of, you put your osteoporosis, you know, journey out there, and you do it in this way that makes it so relatable, because even when you're posting and you're down there and it's this picture of you crying on the floor, you put a funny caption to it and it makes you laugh. But you also understand, like, you're hurting in that moment. Like, and that's clearly the way that you're dealing with it. But I think that is a little bit more of what we need out there. So I want to thank you for how you eloquently do that, and in a way that not a lot of people. I try to be funny sometimes on social media and it just doesn't hit, and I'm like, just forget it, Ryan.
It's not you, it's the internet. It's the internet. It's a fickle place.
I'm like, you're trying too hard. Go back to what works. Go back to your sappy content. That's what they like. So but I think you do it in such a great way. And I think, you know, when you look at this idea, I talk about resilience a lot, and like how you get back up and you move forward and you keep going through life's challenges. Like over the course of your life, you know, in all of these different chapters in your life, have you thought about that idea of like resilience and what it means and how it shows up for you?
I definitely, especially like you were asking me how I felt about boot camp. It was the first time. I'm one of those people, like, things kind of came easily to me as a kid. Like, it wasn't that hard to learn to read. I was always kind of fast and like athletic and like whatever. And it got to the point where, like, as soon as I was challenged with something, I just go in another direction instead of facing the challenge. Like, I became a path of least resistance person.
Ditto.
And boot camp was the first time there was nowhere to turn and be like, never mind, I'd like to leave, please. Like, it was like, no, you have to get through this. And it was the first time I really felt like I had accomplished something. And I was like, oh my God, I can do hard things. I'm like not an idiot like I thought I was. Like, I can really do something hard and like turn something on in me that, and this is so dumb. You know that country song, if you're going through hell, keep on rolling. This is so corny, but that was like the song I always sang to myself in boot camp. And now I like still continues to me when I have tough times. I kind of say that if you just keep on rolling and you'll get out of this particular hell, maybe you'll stumble into another one. But if you just keep going through it instead of looking for ways around it, you will get through it.
Yeah.
And you'll be better off for it in the end. And ever since boot camp, that's kind of how I've had ups and downs, and I make a lot of mistakes. I feel like that's my number one way of learning is by mistakes. But yeah, no, definitely the military changed my whole life and gave me a new perspective on myself that I didn't realize. So Yeah.
I love that. I say that to in my head every time I'm going through something that I want to. And I think as an adult, you find that it is harder. Like when you're in something, you can't turn to something else. And so a lot of times I'm always like, the only way through is through, you know, like that's it. Like you've got to just get through it. So I love that. Kate, it was awesome to talk to you. I'm excited. Hopefully I'll see you at Army Navy this year. What are your predictions? I asked Dave what his game prediction was. So what's your prediction for the game?
I gotta say, just to get a jab in at cons and also just loyalty, I gotta say Navy. I have to say Navy.
But what's the score? Give me a score.
Ooh. 30. So I work at a sports site. I should know. 37-21. Is that a real score that can happen?
Is that a real score? I'm getting yeses from the crowd. Yes, you can have a 37-21. Yes.
37-21 Navy.
Okay. I'm putting it all out. I got to get Cons on. I'm just going to have him FaceTime me his score prediction before. And then I hope to do the compilation with the big Navy win at the end. So
nice.
Yeah. Kate, thank you so much. This was awesome.
Thanks so much for having me. You're the best. I've been following you forever. And I'll say it again, but like, I do feel I know your brother's story, and I'm just so impressed with you and your family. And I just kind of have this love for him that every time I see the logo, I'll see it on a bumper sticker out here or whatever. And I just take a moment to think of him. And as his trash bag cousin from Chester County, I just take a moment, but I really do. And just sending you love. And I'm so impressed with everything you've done.
Oh, I love that. Well, you're a Mannion, that's how it goes.
Oh yeah. I'll see you at the OD.
There you go. Thanks,
all right.
Kate.
Thanks, Ryan.